What if I told you that the real reason behind the creation of America's Space Force has nothing to do with protecting satellites or exploring Mars? Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about space warfare. And drop a comment below if you think the government should declassify more of these secret space programs, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. The cold December air hung heavy over the Pentagon as officials gathered in a classified briefing room in 2019. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of military leaders who knew they were about to make a decision that would reshape the future of warfare. Outside, the American public believed they were witnessing the birth of a new military branch designed for peaceful space exploration and satellite protection. Inside that room, the truth was far more explosive. General John Hyten, then Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, placed a folder marked Eyes Only on the mahogany conference table. The documents inside contained intelligence reports that would make your blood run cold. For years, American spy satellites had been tracking Chinese and Russian activities in space that violated every international treaty ever signed. These weren't peaceful missions or scientific endeavors. They were weapons platforms disguised as civilian technology. The real catalyst for the Space Force wasn't protection or exploration. It was the desperate realization that America was losing a secret war. It didn't even know it was fighting. Chinese satellites had been maneuvering dangerously close to American assets, conducting what intelligence officials called hostile reconnaissance. Russian spacecraft were testing proximity operations that looked suspiciously like attack rehearsals. The evidence was overwhelming, and it was classified at the highest levels. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks later admitted in classified testimony that the Pentagon had been operating under outdated policies that prevented sharing crucial intelligence about space threats. The bureaucratic red tape was literally endangering national security. Military contractors couldn't even bid on defense projects because they lacked the security clearances needed to understand what they were building. The system was broken, and America's enemies knew it. Behind closed doors, Pentagon officials spoke in hushed tones about programs that the public would never hear about. Project Enigma, a cloud-based classified environment that allowed Space Force (FOC) acquisition teams to work on secret projects remotely. The X-37B orbital test vehicle, an unmanned spaceplane that had been conducting mysterious experiments for over a year. Weapons systems so advanced that even describing their basic functions required special authorization. The truth started leaking out in fragments. In August 2021, Breaking Defense reported that the Pentagon was considering unveiling a classified space weapon to demonstrate American capabilities to potential adversaries. The weapon already existed. It wasn't theoretical or under development. It was operational, tested, and ready for deployment. But the Afghanistan withdrawal had postponed any public revelation, leaving the program buried in the deepest levels of classification. Military insiders knew that the Space Force represented something unprecedented in American military history. Unlike other branches that evolved over decades, this was a rapid response to an immediate existential threat. Intelligence reports showed that both Russia and China had developed anti-satellite weapons capable of blinding American military communications in minutes. The GPS systems that guided everything from cruise missiles to smartphone navigation could be jammed or destroyed without warning. The classified briefings painted a terrifying picture of modern warfare. Enemy satellites equipped with robotic arms could grab American assets and drag them into destructive orbits. Cyber weapons could turn friendly satellites against their own networks. Most disturbing of all were reports of kinetic kill vehicles, essentially bullets fired from space, at incredible velocities that could destroy targets on Earth without leaving any evidence of the attack. Space Force commanders faced an impossible paradox. They needed to protect assets that the public couldn't know existed, using weapons that Congress couldn't approve, against threats that diplomats couldn't acknowledge. The traditional military structure simply couldn't handle this level of operational secrecy combined with urgent defensive requirements. A new approach was needed, and it had to be implemented immediately. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory program from the Cold War provided a historical template. Recently declassified documents revealed that the Air Force had spent $1.56 billion between 1963 and 1969 on a secret military space station program. The project was cancelled not because it failed, but because satellite technology had advanced to the point where human operators were no longer necessary for most missions. The lessons learned from MOL became the foundation for modern classified space operations. General Hyten's push for declassification wasn't about transparency or public accountability. It was a strategic communication effort designed to send a clear message to America's adversaries. The theory was simple. If enemies knew that the United States possessed operational space weapons, they might think twice before attacking American assets. But the intelligence community pushed back hard, arguing that revealing capabilities would also reveal vulnerabilities. The Space Training and Readiness Command began developing doctrine for warfare scenarios that sounded like science fiction but were based on very real intelligence assessments. How do you conduct combat operations when the battlefield is 300 miles above Earth and moving at 17,000 miles per hour? How do you coordinate attacks when radio communications take seconds to travel between spacecraft? How do you distinguish between friendly and enemy assets when everything looks like a metal box with solar panels? The X-37B program became the poster child for this new era of secret space operations. Officially described as a technology demonstration platform, the spaceplane conducted classified experiments that lasted for months at a time. Aviation Week reported that the vehicle might serve as a covert satellite deployment platform, launching small military satellites that would never appear in any public catalogue. The secrecy surrounding its missions suggested either intelligence gathering or offensive capabilities testing. Military contractors found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Companies like SpaceX, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin were being asked to develop systems for missions they couldn't fully understand. The classification levels were so high that engineers working on different components of the same project couldn't communicate with each other. Quality control became a nightmare when testing procedures were compartmentalized beyond recognition. The financial implications were staggering. Black budget programs had always existed, but the Space Force required funding levels that dwarfed anything in military history. Building space-based weapons platforms costs exponentially more than terrestrial systems. A single satellite can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's before adding classified military capabilities. The total investment in secret space programs likely exceeds the GDP of most countries. Intelligence officials briefed lawmakers on scenarios that kept them awake at night. A coordinated attack on American satellites could cripple everything from banking systems to emergency services within hours. Military communications would be severed, leaving troops deployed worldwide unable to coordinate with command structures. Commercial aviation would face chaos as GPS navigation failed. The electrical grid could be destabilized as timing signals from space disappeared. The response couldn't wait for traditional procurement processes or congressional debates. Space Force needed operational capabilities immediately, which meant accelerating programs that had been in development for years under different classifications. Weapons systems designed for terrestrial use were being adapted for space deployment. Artificial intelligence programs were being modified to operate in the vacuum of space with minimal human oversight. Russian and Chinese developments added urgency to every decision. Intelligence reports showed that both nations were testing technologies that could only be described as space weapons. Satellites that could change their orbits at will. Spacecraft equipped with robotic manipulators that could disable enemy assets. Most concerning were reports of directed energy weapons mounted on space platforms, essentially laser cannons that could blind sensors or even destroy targets from orbit. The Pentagon's decision to reduce classification levels for some space programs in 2024 was a calculated risk. Deputy Secretary Hicks approved policies that would allow limited sharing of information with industry partners and allied nations. The goal was to accelerate development timelines by removing bureaucratic barriers that had been slowing progress for years. But critics worried that any information sharing increased the risk of intelligence leaks. Space Force officers trained for scenarios that would have been unthinkable just a decade earlier. Combat operations conducted entirely by remote control from ground stations. Battles fought between unmanned platforms moving at orbital velocities. weapons that could strike targets on Earth from space with precision and devastating effect. The traditional concepts of military engagement were being rewritten for an entirely new domain of warfare. The most disturbing aspect of these classified programs wasn't their existence, it was their necessity. America's enemies had forced this evolution by developing their own space-based weapon systems. The intelligence was clear. If the United States didn't develop defensive and offensive space capabilities immediately, the nation would be vulnerable to attacks that could cripple modern civilization within hours. The Space Force represents more than just another military branch. It's a fundamental shift in how America approaches national security in the 21st century. The classified technologies being developed today will determine whether democracy can survive in an era when warfare has expanded beyond Earth's atmosphere. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the public can't know most of the details until it's either too late or too dangerous to reveal them. The leaked documents and insider testimonies paint a picture of a military branch created not for exploration or peaceful purposes, but as a rapid response to imminent threats that most Americans don't even know exist. The Space Force wasn't built to reach for the stars, it was built to prevent enemies from using those same stars as weapons platforms against the homeland. The forbidden technology they're fighting over isn't just advanced gadgets or scientific experiments, it's the future of warfare itself, and whoever controls space will control the fate of civilization.